Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rail Natter. It's episode 205, When British Rail Ran Boats, brackets ships, brackets a brief history of Sealink et al. Yeah, we're talking. This is a much requested episode, actually. We're talking about that time British Rail had a bunch of boats. The class 99s, I think they call. I mean, amongst lots of things, they call class 99s. In any case, because tops. In any case, we are indeed going to click on the right thing. We are going, and also click that button. We're going to be talking about Sealink, which is the kind of brand name, at least for a while, of the British Rail Shipping and International Services Division. More on this momentarily, however. We're not going to talk. There's not going to be a super. I'll tell you what. I'll hold that caveat because I have an apology. I have an apology to make, everyone. Everyone, I have an apology to make. We've been progressing episodes since episode 201 without shouting out the associated tops British Rail classes because I assumed that there were none up until we got to the 210. How wrong I was. So this is episode 205, which means we have to shout out the 205. The 200s, the 20Xs are reserved, or rather the 2XX numbers reserved for diesel electric multiple units, of which here is a class 205 in southern colours, looking weird. It's a thumper, and it is a class 205. Tops classified these as 205s. So, and we've missed out on shouting at the 201, 202. In fact, here is a 202. 203, 204, and we have a couple more to come as well. So here they are. They look weird because this. I mean, this one looks like it's. Although I don't think it is. It looks a bit like a converted. It looks Mark 1E, although it isn't. It looks Hastings with this one. Really, the fact that it's got square sides down to the sole bar is very much looks Hastings dimensions. Anyway. You'll notice there's no third rail around here, although this is Southern Region. This is Enfield Town, this station, isn't it? Although actually there's a load of happy-looking overheads here. Anyway, these are DMUs. These are multiple units. Detour rightly pointing out, in honour of this topic, here's a reminder that Sail Rail still exists for fixed-price fares between Ireland and GB. Make use of them. Martha's rightly saying thump thump. Simon C858, looking forward to this one. Many of my childhood holidays started with a Sealink sailing from Weymouth. So, a caveat, this episode isn't going to go diving into the nuts and bolts of Sealink itself, a deep history. It's going to look at why British Rail ended up running ships, boats, and then what happened afterwards, and a little bit of the in between. As ever, there are other people who have done the detailed history of Sealink, I'm sure, and I'm going to point you all to one of the good references that is worth looking up. There's lots of good histories of Sealink. Well, actually, I don't know if there are lots of good histories for Sealink, but we're going to talk about the overall story, the picture, the context, either side of it, if you like. As ever, in true Rail Natter style, we're saying we're talking about the history of the thing, but actually we spend more time talking about the history before and after the thing. But that's fine. Hopefully that'll still be engaging. Give that context. And James Derrick is asking if next week is going to be covering motor rail. Anyway, Caroline Blezinski is cut off. French. Oh, wait. Connect Rosslare to the French mainland. Build a one true Eurotunnel now the UK's out the EU. Well, absolutely. What are 101? Callum is asking what 101 is. That's just the. I presume that's the 20. Well, it's actually this is a 202. Actually, what's interesting is that this has a. Where's me wiggle? Let me just do this. Oh, is this plugged in? Oh no, it isn't. Oh, that won't help. Will it? Right. There. Ding ding a ding. You probably heard that. Here we are. Look, there we go. That says class 202. There, it's the kind of the tops info box there. This I presume this will refer to could be the old tops. Also, could be referring to the Southern Region internal codes. Anyway, let's get rid of that. Without further ado, everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, we start by asking the question, what is the deal with ferries? What is those? Well, indeed, what indeed is those? Actually, very briefly, see if I can see the reflection of a door. I think, hopefully I closed the... I'm going to... Back in... Just a neat little second. Audio-only people, you're going to get this cut out. I just need to double-check a door. We're good. There's the brief, fearful moment that I might well have accidentally left the door open when my wee one is sleeping. I did not, possibly because my darling wife closed the door, because I'm absent-minded / the chaos brain. We're good. Sorry about that. So, yes, what is the deal with ferries? What's the deal with... The thing is, if Martha's saying do Seinfeld voice, the trouble is I end up dropping into Justin Rosniak's Cuomo. What's the deal with marine transport? Right, what is the deal with ferries? So, we must jump back to 1150. These little fools. Yes, because... Oh, let's get my miniaturized... Firstly, hello everyone, it's me. Hi. The trains of the sea. Yeah, well, yeah, you could say that, couldn't you? Let's miniaturize my face. So, what are these little dudes doing? Well, they appear to have taken a mule. And actually, this is a picture from like the medieval times. So, but I could not find a nice picture of the ferry. Well, this is a later version of said ferry. But what am I on about? Well, basically, Birkenhead. Because we have to drop ourselves to Birkenhead because. Benedictine monks in a priory in Birkenhead start charging for the operation of a rowboat across the Mersey. So kind of the first Mersey ferry appears. Hello, Gareth. Hello, yes. This is an episode for you specifically, Gareth. Benedictine monks they charge a pretty penny for this crossing, and so we see probably in 1150 the first ferry. The ships that moved people around had existed before. This seemingly is the first example of a commercial ferry service, and it's also, I suppose, what's key about this one is it is the oldest confirmed that is still operating. If I wallop my mic arm, that it's still operating. Here's a later machine running the same service. You can start seeing this thing is a bit more sort of pleasant than just the rowboat. And today you have this admittedly pretty knackered. What is it? I suppose it's not steamship. Is it the MV Snowdrop? I'm not sure. It's the Snow. Gareth, you'll be able to say this. It's a Snowdrop, and it still runs. This is the longest commercially operating, the longest lived commercially operating ferry service in the world. I believe that's its own record in any case. So that's ferries. That is ferries, but what the key thing is more specifically to RailNatter is what about railways and ferries? Where do these start getting connected? So, we jump to, actually, it could be any wagonway or of back in the even the 1600s, but certainly in the 1700s, in the UK, Tanfield Wagonway is one of the one of the first evidenced connections between railways and regular, scheduled, integrated services. So people often think that the railways and the canals. Well, people often say, "Oh, canals got knackered by the railways." You know, the canals came along, they became outdated. Railways came along. Bzzzt, wrongo. No. Canals enabled railways enabled canals. Really, they were concurrent technologies achieving slightly different things. Yes, railways later on did replace a lot of canals, but actually, bearing in mind the railways had been in the UK since the late 1500s, railways, canals, totally interlinked, and scheduled services on the coast continued to be the main way coal. So integrated railway and coastal barge services, much like was happening at Tanfield, were the main way coal moved in Britain until remarkably recently, until the 70s, more coal that way than by. I mean, someone will catch me if I'm wrong on this one, but I believe more coal that way than actually came down like the likes of the Great Central. So enormous amounts of coal still moving by barge to London on the seas, and it was an integrated system, an integrated service, and that is a ferry. So for the first integrated passenger system, we have to jump to the Monkland and Kirkintilloch Railway. Because in 1833, here is, by the way, that train. Here it is. Look, there it is. Lovely. There's that train. They started operating a scheduled service across the Forth, I believe it was, and fairly soon after that, so we're seeing this, as the railway started proliferating, the need to. That was Causey Arch, by the way. Yeah, there's lovely Causey Arch, this fantastic and still extant railway structure here. Very nice. So we jumped to the London Blackwall Railway. So as the frenzy of railways exploded, the need to cross waterways without bridges also expanded. London Blackwall Railway indeed operated So 1842. There's a picture of their ferry service. They commenced a ferry service from Blackwall to Gravesend in 1842, which is one of the earliest railway shipping services. So specific railway shipping service as opposed to the Monkland and Kirkintilloch, which was running a kind of an integrated but sort of partnered service. So there we go. Then we jump to notice there's a bit of an emerging Scottish theme in this early railway ferry action. The Edinburgh, Leith and New Haven Railway. Interestingly, we have to talk about this guy. This is some fun. So this episode does all sorts of weird, integrated, weird, connected history stuff. History not being linear. This sort of strange interrelationships of stuff. We have to talk firstly about this boy. This is Sir Thomas Bouch. Now, why is that name familiar? We'll get to that. Because in lieu of the ability to afford, or indeed the engineering of the day, to span the Firth of Forth, he had to come up with a solution. And his solution was, began operation on the 3rd of February, 1850. And here it is, this is an illustration. The floating railway between Burnt Island and Granton. This is included. So basically, this is an extension of the East Coast Main Line. East Coast Main Line came up into Edinburgh, went up to Leith, found its way down to Granton. From Granton, there was this elaborate system of the first ever roll-on, roll-off ferry. And it allowed, with this elaborate contraption of nonsense, and it operated for quite a long time, by the way. There's a low-res pixel-free picture of the actual picture of this thing in extant in the 1880s, 1883 or 4, I think, that you can find online. And you can see this elaborate nonsense to enable, chiefly freight wagons here, to actually go on to the boat. You just chug the trains onto the boat. They roll onto the ferry, and then they roll off the ferry at the other end. So there you go. I know, right? Now, you might be familiar with Sir Thomas Bouch for something else that he did, which is this. And so there's this strange connection, because that was essentially Sir Thomas Bouch creating this ferry service, this roll-on, roll-off ferry service, to avoid the need to build a bridge because the technology wasn't allowed. He then proceeded to build a bridge over an equivalent waterway that has very high winds and required a kind of a high clear distance for admiralty reasons, that obviously then fell into the sea, and effectively therefore delayed building of the bridge that was to span the Firth of Forth, which then eventually, of course, his design was thrown out. He was ruined. This is the Tay Bridge, by the way. He was ruined. And then, of course, it took until the 1890s before we saw the vastly over-engineered and delightfully so Forth Bridge, the bridge, as it is known. The most spectacular structure in the world, to my view, but certainly one of the most spectacular. I think certainly the most spectacular structure in Britain. So there you go. Wonderful. So there's this roundabout kind of strange history of crossing the Forth in Boucher's relationship with that, coming back to ferries. So there we go. We'll come back briefly to this in pictorial form later, but we have to, interestingly enough, we have to jump forwards to 1998 to talk about this the largest, so you go from that sort of little nonsense to the largest roll-on roll-off rail ferry, which is the Skane, actually probably it's the Scan, I'd imagine. Interestingly operated by Stena Line, foreshadowing, and this thing you can see it's the world's largest roll-on roll-off ferry. Built quite a while ago now, because we don't really make them like this. You can see it's putting a road vehicle on and off this thing at this point. But this is you can see this incredible tandem bit of S&C here to enable trains to get on and off the boat. It's very cool. Roll on, roll off. So we must return. So that was 1998. Let's jump back from 1998. To this whole thing about British Rail running ferries. What was with that? What's going on? So we must, of course, talk about January 1948, because what happened then? Well, we all know what happened then. British Railways was formed. British Railways was nationalised. Actually, wait a minute. I have a thing for this. Let me grab this. Of course, I have a thing for this that I have not pre-prepared and should have pre-prepared. There we go. There we are. That was late. Yes, so lovely. British Railways formed, and just there's chaos going on already. I'm so tired and distractible. It's quite something. Anyway, what is it? Probably sounds something like scone. Yeah, I don't know. It's sauna with a K. Scone. Ow. It is an ow. Ow. Oh, scone. Oh, of course it is. Oh, as in like yol. But so it's scone. Yeah, scone. Yeah, everyone agrees. Fine. Track look less that to avoid switches on the ferry. Yeah, absolutely. Bad logo for the good service. There we go. Fine. So, fine, right. It's currently tied up. It's currently tied up in Rostock. There we go. So, British Railways. What happened? Well, the railways were nationalised almost entirely, as we know, alongside all existing railway ferry operations. Now, the opportunity was not taken to nationalise all ferry operations. So there were lots of bits of ferry all over the place, particularly in Scotland, in fact. McBrain is a good example, and Caledonian something or other, also separate, for example, merged later under the Scottish Transport Group, but at this point not very much still a private operation. Very much an opportunity missed. But, oh, by the way, this is the point where I cut in. This is the point where I cut in and say, if you want a really good history of Sealink, pick up Jeremy Harthill's Masters by Research from the University of York Railway Studies. I dare say Dr. DT was in some way involved in this, possibly second reader. So yeah, have a read of this. Some really interesting stuff in there. It talks about the fact that, spoiler alert, what we're about to read about from 48 to 84 was somewhat of a success story. So Martha had no idea what was going on because nobody was using the sound. Yeah, okay, fine. So British Railways, they inherited 129 vessels. They inherited 83 calling points in 9 countries, and consequently had the largest coastal shipping operation in Europe. So we're talking about, like, because this is not just passenger freight. This is freight very much as well. So an enormous amount of of kind of shipping capacity here. So that was 1948, and kind of it runs some level of modification, not a huge amount. It continues running. We're going to park British Rail for a moment because we have to jump to talk about a kind of guy. Because we jumped to 1962, we have to talk about Sten A. Olsen in Gothenburg in Sweden. Here's Sten. Here he is. And Sten here, being a wacky Swedish guy, looking like the most wacky Swedish guy, Don't ask too much about what he was doing in the 1940s. Sten here found a thing called Stena Line. Stena Line. Take note. This is relevant. Anyway, right. Oh, another thing that's relevant is worth just noting in 1968 that this is there is a combination of companies that all merged together to form Townsend Torrenson. Torrenson. Relevant. This is basically a combination of like the Townsend Car Ferries, Otto Torrenson's shipping company and its subsidiary Torrenson Car Ferries, and kind of this remains as the brand name, but this is a company called European Ferries Limited. Relevant, a competitor with our wonderful British Rail ferry services. So we shall keep an eye on them. I'm sure that they will not do anything dodgy that we have to worry about. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, that's right. It's BR again. So we continue with BR. What's happening with our shipping? Well, they've modernised. They update quite a lot of the ships. They've inherited a huge number of ships, quite a few from the 1930s. A range of fairly battered ships, and they start procuring new shipping. But we actually need to talk about, well, firstly, here's reshaping of British Railways. So we need to talk a bit about reshaping, because I'm going to park the passenger stuff, the interesting stuff happening during Sealink. So I'm going to talk about, I said this is going to be brief. The thing that we're going to talk about that's interesting is actually it's the stuff around the passenger services that are the most interesting. So reshaping of British Railways, part one, talks about one of the key things we remember is it created Freightliner, right? So the 15th of November 1965, we see the first commercial operation of the Freightliner concept, the system here, envisaged largely as a means of transferring goods inland, kind of as part of inland domestic services. Actually, fairly quickly it was seen that this was going to provide a very effective way of manoeuvring goods from the coast inland. And so containers. We have to talk about containers momentarily. The first ever container ship. We'll talk about container shipping. First ever container ship is. Wait a minute. Let me just get get my buttons up here. Lovely. The first ever container ship was launched in February 1931. It is by the Southern Railway. This is the first container ship in the world that was built for containers. Strange enough, it doesn't look like it. It looks like a little sort of ferry thing. It's called the Auto Carrier. It was owned by the Southern Railway. And it had 21 slots for the Southern Railway's own sort of container stuff. The Beeching Claxon did just go off. So its own container stuff. So Britain had the first container vessel, and indeed we've been doing quite a lot of different types of containerization on the railway network. Roll forwards to May 1964, and we have the first fully cellular purpose-built container ship in the form of Associated Steamships kind of company limited. Is that right? I think so. In May 1964, and it is the MV Coringa. This is the first specifically custom-built cellular container ship. Everyone remembers the Ideal X, which was a converted vessel that the famous McLean. If you want the relevant thing that you want to do here is let's get big face. The book you want to read is this one here. If you want to learn stuff about containerization, very relevant, read the box. Mark Levinson doesn't talk enough about railway containerization, but he does say quite a lot of interesting stuff, and there's a good history of containerization here. So well worth a read if you are so inclined. So why is this pertinent? Why is all this stuff pertinent? Why is it relevant? Well, it's because we roll forward to the mid to late 60s, and British Rail, through, in fact, British Rail off its own back procures some cellular container ships here. You can see these cellular container ships. There they are, kind of under construction. These are. Oh, let's just pressing the wrong button here. These are the Sea Freight. Oh golly, the Sea Freightliner 1 and the Sea Freightliner 2. The Sea Freightliner 1 and the Sea Freightliner 2, this kind of pair of ships. You can see here, in fact, I'm pretty sure we saw these containers in our freight episode ages and ages ago. You can see there's the BR thing. You can see the very distinctive looking crane to actually lift in the containers into this thing, and this became quite a success. This rapidly became a very successful concept for British Rail, highly profitable one actually, and as we, Ford rapidly became an initial customer, and they were using these to ship parts to and from continental Europe as part of their kind of lean operations for building vehicles. You can see the model that proved this concept in the National Rail Museum in the warehouse. Actually, it's up on a high shelf and can't be seen very well. Hopefully, I'm hoping that they'll bring it down and put it in a case and present it next to the freight stuff. But anyway, here they are, these two fine vessels, cellular vessels, purchased. And this is, we're talking about the freight, but actually BR invested quite heavily in new vessels on there as part of Sealink. And as a result of that, despite the changing fortunes of the way people travelled, it continued to be quite a successful venture. We'll get into the numbers of that momentarily, but we have to talk about brands, because in November 1969, for various reasons, the operations, kind of for all sorts of kind of not hugely interesting reason, the ferry services were split off into British Rail Shipping and International Services in November 1969. This is a bit of a mouthful, so fairly quickly... am I going to mention the reversed logo? Possibly. Fairly quickly, Sealink appeared. So Sealink was a brand that popped up in the 1970s. And Sealink wasn't just British, actually, because in 1970... kind of as the Sealink name and what became kind of known as the Sealink Consortium appeared, it incorporated services run or kind of under the Sealink brand, but with the involvement of our friends at SNCF, Société Nationale de Chemin de Fer Français, Stumfart Maatschappij Zeeland, and Regie voor Maritiem Transport, or the Regie de Transport Maritime. So that's the French, the Dutch, and the Belgian operators of kind of rail operators and transport operators. That actually, so this is the railway SNCF, obviously railways, because everyone knows what SNCF is. This is actually the Belgian Maritime Transport Organisation, state maritime organisation, and this is the what is that? The steamship company of Zeeland, so like Holland, kind of the Netherlands, really. So yeah, like maritime transport, they're basically all broadly all state entities, and all of these became started running services as part of the Sealink Consortium, enabling operations over the Channel. But the other operations were happening. So they were operating services to Ireland, fairly extensive services to Ireland. The services that had been running in some of the lochs in Scotland fairly rapidly diminished. There wasn't much Scottish presence beyond that, but there's also services running from Hull, and the big focus of those services operating were across the Channel and to Ireland. Big concentration of the ferry services, and so. Here we have a nice picture in that their continental Europe that they have here, with trains that don't look like ours, and next to a Sealink ship here, looking very grand. This is the Dieppe to Newhaven service, I suppose. That's you can see the SNCF logo here. There is the SNCF logo. Probably the one before the good SNCF logo, but anyway, everything's looking very European here, and it's quite nice. It's quite a nice picture. It's a fun little caravan here. I quite like that. Just a caravan on a train. It's a bit sort of Titfield Thunderball, isn't it? Anyway, harmless. It's a harmless maritime tradition. Zeeland is very specifically not Holland. Yes, thanks, Al. I caught myself as soon as I said it. I did not mean Holland. I meant the Netherlands as part of it. It's the bit of the Netherlands that is not Holland. Thank you, Al Storer. Yes, everyone here can correct me on this. Sealink made several cameo appearances, as did its vigorous enemies in the various other ferry operators. Yeah, ferries were, by the fact they were popping up in film, indicator of the common thing. This picture, though, is interesting because it's showing us, it's giving us an indication of some of the challenges facing ferries as we progressed through the decade. So, let's in a bit of history that we're tying in multiple companies that aren't Sealink here into this story because they'll become relevant. We're going to go back to in 1976. We go back to Townsend Torrison because Townsend Torrison buy the Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company. So there's a connection to railways here, although it's not BR. New Haven, Connecticut. That's right, Martha. Yeah, sorry. In doing so, because the Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company were created to basically run what became the Port of Felixstowe, one of the UK's biggest, the UK's largest container shipping container port. So we're talking about containers, the box, as it were. But this private company comes in after BR had been prioritised. Harwich, I think, had been the first of the BR developments. Felixstowe, owned by the Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company, and now bought by this ferry company. Also, a ferry company and property company, to be honest, even by this point. Also owned by all the land owned by Trinity College, Cambridge. That's where they make a lot of money. So, oh my goodness me. So P&O. We have to talk about P&O. What are P&O up to? What are P&O up to? That's a very good question. What are they doing about this? But they later buy this. Presumably it's because P&O are sniffing around at this point. So pay close attention to these guys. P&O appear. This is the P&O. By the way, the what are they? The P&O. Can I remember the? I'm going to have to try and remember. They basically, P&O are about to buy. P&O is the Peninsula and Oriental Steam Navigation Company. They swing in and buy. I'm trying to remember exactly what year it was now. I've not given a little dot here. So anyway, they basically they come in and buy. That's later. It's later. It's fine. It's later. This shouldn't be here. That's why I was getting confused. I was like, what's this doing here? Let me just scroll down to me. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about P&O. We're going to forget P&O for now because we're talking about the future of ferries. Oh, my goodness. I tell you what, the history around this ended up being fiddlier around the edges than I intended it to be. So, Sealink. British Rail are running ferries around the North Atlantic Islands. And there's a challenge. So it's not like it was new for cars to be using ferries. You can see here the rather popular and somewhat oversubscribed into the 60s for bridge reasons. Fourth ferry here. You can see the bridge in the background looking stunning. It's a really nice picture, that one. And also, so this is pretty common and was getting more popular as more people moved to their car. Therefore, the connection between train and between rail and ferry was being loosened. The other thing here is, and this is an example, this was a Bristol nonsense with British United Channel crossing. For cars, people were also wanting to take their cars across the Channel, very specifically, trying to take their cars across the Channel. And this was a rather novel way of doing it, but actually there were better ways of doing it, which is boats. Put your car on the boat. You can carry more on a boat than in a plane. And BR had to rise to the challenge because that loosening, that kind of, I wouldn't say it was a total demise, but there was a loosening of the connections between railways and ferries. In the past, this huge amounts of branding had gone into, huge amounts of commercial advertising had gone into talking about railways to ferry, all those, you go to Blackfriars Station and you go to the north entrance of Blackfriars. And there's an extract from the old station with all of the locations, the international locations you could get to via ferry, via rail, integrated rail and ferry service. By the way, a good idea. And actually, we should think about doing more of that sort of thing in places where you don't have the Channel Tunnel. More on that structure later. We'll get there. Anyway, as I say, here's a nice extract from some telly at the time. Cars. Cars is what's happening. You can see here we're having more and more cars. But did BR just sort of shrug their shoulders and go, no, we're railways? No, they did not. So they'd inherited quite an aging fleet. I think that this here is possibly one of the... This is a 1930s vessel here, I believe. It's a really old ship. Again, old. Less old, BR started commissioning new vessels. Started commissioning this ridiculous thing here, of course, looking fun. This thing, although it looks tired, is actually quite a modern sort of modern design for fast, and indeed they invested in new vessels, not necessarily in terms of the speed of the explicit speed of the vessel, because there's an optimization of speed versus fuel consumed, but speed of loading is far more critical, just like on a railway. And perhaps there's some railway thinking going here, because just like on a railway, it's not the top speed on the main line that necessarily gives you your overall journey time benefit. It's the how fast it takes you to get people, how fast you arrive into port and how fast it takes you to get people on and off the train, the boat. And so they were designing ships. There are quotes talking about some of these vessels that talk about a success or a triumph of marine engineering in some of these very, very clever boats, allowing vehicles to get on and off as well. And this is as well at the same time as the expansion of the container services. So this is a nice one. This is St. George. They kind of made a point of the insides of these ferries. This is the one of the kind of the cherry on top, the kind of the pièce de résistance, the finest of their vessels running the actually, this Harwich to Hook of Holland. It might be the Harwich Hook of basically the cross-channel service that goes over to the Netherlands. And this is very snazzy. Look how cool all these people look travelling by ferry. Look at this guy here. He's looking cool. Look, this person here is wearing quite the outfit. It's quite something. Anyway, everything's very 70s there. They rose to the challenge. They really did rise to the challenge. And this is where we have some fun. This is the bit where we talk about some fun here, because these are some numbers. You see lots of numbers here. So 1948, you can see there's income here from passengers is about £5 million. Profit. So this is the important bit, because this this is straight from the master's thesis, by the way, so well worth having a look. Let's have a look at the profit numbers. So 1948, about £3 million of profit, and that profit kind of wavers 1, 2, 3, continues wavering right into the 60s, and then you see, as we see BR stopping being quite so complacent about things, the numbers start climbing. They start climbing. By the time you get to the 70s and 80s, where you've seen some of this modernization, these new vessels coming through, this response to the changes of these alterations, these changes to the way that they operate, to they're responding to the vehicle, they're providing better vehicle ferries, their numbers start climbing. They start climbing and start climbing into the early 80s, 1983, 13 million quid. It's a tidy profit coming in. The income has increased substantially. So it's seriously profitable. The master's thesis is indeed available online. Do grab it. Profit, the important bit. Well, it's an indicator of the overall health of the way that the business was run. And if we're taking that as the measure of the day, that's kind of the key point here historically, is of the measure of the day. This is a very effective part of British Rail. One of the few bits of British Rail that was, on paper, turning a profit. So, this is pertinent. Why is this pertinent? Well, because we have to talk about what then happened to Sealink. Because in its infinite wisdom, the government of the day, I don't know which government that was, 1984. Well, actually, no. Let's briefly before we get to the 1980s. Let's talk about 1978, because at this point the ferry business was incorporated as Sealink UK Limited. So here we are. Sealink, 28th November 1978, incorporated as Sealink UK Limited. Still, however, a wholly owned subsidiary of the BRB, still part of the Sealink consortium, but a separate company now, separate from BR. Not, I wouldn't say privatised, but it's a bit more like, the modern way that nationalised stuff exists, as a separate arm's length company. So that's kind of there. So, Sealink, 1978. And there is their last and most grand vessel here, the St. Nicholas here, you can see, looking very grand here, 1978. So, jump forward to 1984, and what government do we have? Well, I couldn't possibly comment, but they sell Sealink UK Limited to Sea Containers. Sea Containers, remember Sea Containers? For £66 million in the day. There are. So Sea Containers, which is a US Virgin Islands registered company. You'll know them from operating GNER. You remember GNER? Well, they were run by Sea Containers. Sea Containers, funnily enough, thanks to shenanigans, now gone. But, so, at this point, we lost BR lost Sealink. They ceased to, despite it being a profitable, bringing money into the exchequer, lost, gone. And we see this kind of change from we see the change from Sealink, the lovely Sealink railway alphabet here. Indeed, with as lots of people have been talking about, the reverse British arrows, British Rail, the reverse double arrows, as part of sort of a nod to maritime tradition about which side ships pass each other. It's all there in the book that's behind me. The Corporate Identity Manual has lots of fun stuff about shipping in it. Anyway, sea containers pick it up and they rename they rename Sealink to Sealink British Ferries. Okay, fine. And they introduce this thing, the golden maggot here on top. So they get rid of the nice red funnel and they make this blue and gold thing, and they call it. They do not call it the galloping golden maggot, but that's what it ends up being called instead of the glorious double arrows. This is all the same ship, by the way, St. Nicholas. So that's 1984. Jump forward to 1987, and we're going over to. People saying they like the sea containers livery, and I prefer this. I think this is nicer and this gets my vote. I think it's very nice and clean. Interestingly, lacking the double arrows at this point, which is interesting. I think the St. Nick wasn't provided with them, which is sad. It should have had them, shouldn't it? 1987. Why do we need to talk about this? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, P&O had been sniffing around, by the way, yes. Well, P&O is sniffing around and indeed buys Townsend Torreson, and Townsend Torreson had three sort of arguably state of the art, very fast roll-on, roll-off ferries. One of them was the Herald of Free Enterprise, another one was the Spirit of Free Enterprise, and what was the other one? The Pride of Free Enterprise? I might have made that up. Spirit, Herald, Pride of Free Enterprise. Names that are very interesting because they're, given that they're competing with British Rail, which was not Free Enterprise, state-run, and doing very well for itself. It's interesting that they were called that. What happened to one of these ships, the Herald of Free Enterprise? Yes, on the 6th of March 1987, it fell over. For a variety of reasons that you can find out by going to the World Energy Problem episode about it, but it fell over. Man's private hubris, for a variety of reasons. A lot of them relate. Well, go listen to the World Energy Problem podcast episode, but this was a faster ship than those it was competing with. Faster, lightened down. But actually, it ended up, the journey time was about the same because of the fact that it had there were issues in its arrival. It was a faster ship, I think it was a less maneuverable ship, so it took a little bit more time to actually navigate through. But yeah, state of the art, fell over for a variety of stupid reasons that you can find out. Listen to the WTOP episode, which I strongly recommend. Here is a large ferry on its side, and it ended up killing quite a lot of people. Nearly 200 people, I think. 193 people killed as a result of this disaster. For those who don't know, the spoiler: the ship's bow doors had been left open. The whole thing just filled with water and free surface effect. It wasn't so much the Herald of Free Enterprise as the Herald of Free Surface Effect, and the ship fell over and drowned a lot of people. Not very nice. So, funnily enough, fairly rapidly, these ships were renamed, and the brand at P&O accelerated their rebranding of these ships to get rid of the TNT, the sort of TT livery, to disassociate with the disaster. So yes, P&O. Interestingly, at this point, P&O also has, as a result of this purchase, has Felixstowe. So, and still does. So, ish. What else is happening? Well, in 1989, we lose the Dutch. The Dutch are off. That's very sad. They go. We lose the Dutch. Stumvaart Maatschappij Zeeland is taken over by Stena Line. That's right, Stena Line. Pay close attention to Stena Line. They're here. And talking of Stena Line, on the 11th of November 1991, Sea Containers sells Sealink British Ferries to Stena Line. So Stena Line is starting to consolidate its position. You've got P&O, Stena Line, DFDS is still doing bits and pieces across the channel, but the big players very much at this point are therefore P&O and Stena Line. So we go from Sealink to Sealink British Ferries, sea containers, to Sealink Stena Line. So they get rid of the British Ferries and they put the Stena Line text on it, but while kind of retaining that Sealink name. So we still have Sealink, very much distant. A distant memory, the BR at this point. Is, so from 1984 to 1992, we see Stena Line rebranding those ships. On the 13th of November 1992, in fact, is where you have this rebranding. A jump forward to 1995, and they do it again. On the 3rd of November 1995, they then rename from Sealink Stena Line to Stena Sealink. They retain the little squiggly maggot, partly because they don't have a choice, because it's a large physical object that was attached to the ship. So there's not much they could do about it. They retain the golden squiggly, squirmy maggot thing, but their branding, the typeface very much moves into being the logotype of Stena at that point. Meanwhile, a thing is happening. Some people are getting up to some stuff underneath all these boats. And indeed, on the 14th of November 1994, so a little bit before Stena does all of its renaming, the 14th of November 1994, these things start appearing in Waterloo because the channel opens. The Channel Tunnel here is a fine, spiky-ended and ridiculously over-kitted with its third rail shoe, and also the joke of it going over a level crossing here at very low speed relative to what it's doing in Europe. But anyway, this Class 373 Eurostar whizzing through Kent on its way to Waterloo, having come out of the Channel Tunnel, here it is, whizzing along, and becomes very, very popular very, very quickly. Let's go back to Stena Line, because Stena Line finally in 1996 retires the Sealink name. Sealink is gone, long live Sealink. It just is Stena Line. It becomes Stena Line outright. Funnily enough, at the same time, SNCF here with their spikier, newer logo, terminate their pooling agreement with Sealink and begin operating their ferries under the brand Sea France. There we are, Sea France. So they started running those. Interestingly enough, at this point, particularly with the Channel Tunnel, but indeed before that, and one of the reasons why there was a lot of success, BR had cottoned on to the fact that a lot of the popularity of these ferries was the fact that they could sell dump tons of duty-free stuff to people. So part of the reason these ferries retain their interest and their traffic is because they're cheap, much cheaper than any of the alternatives, flying, for example. And you get the duty-free experience, so you can go on, fill your boots and suitcase and shopping trolley and boot of your car with cheap alcohol, relatively speaking, and have a jolly time. So they retain some level of popularity, but their market is being somewhat gobbled up. Now, P&O are once again up to shenanigans, and indeed, on the 10th of March 1998, they merge. They come to an arrangement with Stena Line to merge their operations of of what had been European ferries, P&O European ferries, with what had been Sealink to form P&O Stena Line. They have merged. So glorious capitalism once again tending to monopoly. So P&O continue their shenanigans at this point. Why are they continuing their shenanigans? Well, because they're P&O. And so that was 10th of March 1998. We jump forward to August 2002, and P&O announces its intention to buy out the 40% stake it held in P&O Stena Line, owned by Stena. And P&O Stena Line then just becomes P&O Ferries. There's this new thing, instantly divested from the main P&O, but it continues. I've missed out. There's lots of other bits of history that I want to talk about in separate episodes because they're fun to do so. By the way, Sealink, Sea Speed, no. Speedlink, no. Hover Speed, no. Speedlink, basically the ferry, the hovercraft. We're going to talk about hovercraft in a separate episode in the future. So they exist. They're part of this story, but I've pulled it out. What happens to container shipping kind of also becomes its own story. So I talked about what Sealink initialized, but how that then got spun off P&O continued to operate that as and the way that was split out is also worth picking up. The P&O ferry, well, it was a consortium. So this is the question. So before, P&O Stena Line was a consortium arrangement, but P&O Ferries is just P&O. Stena Line's off the case. They're gone. The P&O bought them out. And jump forward to 2006, and P&O gets bought by DP World. Hooray! Dubai Ports, wonderful. And in turn, the same year, end up getting bought out by Dubai World, which is a similar petrodollar type situation. Let's jump back to Sea France, because we're going to talk about the various players. On the 9th of January 2012, Sea France gets liquidated following some dealings related to, partly by the private organisation that was currently running at that point. SNCF being wound down. It's partly to avoid a takeover by a cooperative of its own unionised workers. Eventually, all the assets of Sea France, including stuff that used to have the Sealink livery on it, ends up being run by DFDS. So DFDS kind of gained some of those services. Anyway, let's park what was Sea France. They're gone. They're off the table. 2019, and P&O Ferries gets bought by DP World again. DP World buy them back. Yes. And so we kind of end up in the present day with these ferries looking like this. This is a very large ferry, Pride of Hull. Or is it the end of the story? Because let's see. Oh, Deirdre is saying booze cruise was ended long before that. So yes, the booze cruise was a thing that BR capitalized on, and it was wound down as we went into sort of single market situation. Duty free between UK and other EU countries ended. So yes, there was less that disappeared, and very much was winding down. The disappeared, and the Channel Tunnel starts. So you can see the desire to be travelling on the ferry had been diminished by all of these activities. Thank you, Deirdre, for catching us on that one and making me be more specific. Very kind. But the people did cross the channel to raid the supermarkets for better value booze in France. That was also a thing, and people still did that. So yeah, thank you, Deirdre. Specifics necessary. We will get Detour on by that in the future. I'll continue pestering until it happens. Anyway, no, it's not the end of the story, because on the 17th of March 2022, you may remember, P&O decides to just sack all of its staff, with plans to replace them with cheap agency workers who are not unionised and have no good working conditions. Oh. P&O said it was a tough decision, but would not be a viable business without the changes. What it means is it's no longer a viable business. If you can't run a business without giving your workers good conditions and pay, you can't run the business. The business ain't viable anymore. It's done. Toyoto. Story's over. So, let's briefly dwell on this. So we get to the point where what was a public ferry operation gets owned by P&O, and therefore gets obliterated. Big private organisation, and just obliterates the working conditions. Quality of the service greatly decreased. It has been greatly decreased. It's interesting that DP World, who the parent company, had just when they did this, they just paid out like 300 million quid's worth of dividends. So they had plenty of money to actually increase staff, as is the case across most companies at the moment in the world. It's inflation is not being caused by public investment. It's not being caused by higher wages. It's not actually as much being caused by strains in supply chains, although that's a contributor. It's primarily being driven by greatly increased profit percentages. So companies just driving profits at the expense of everything else. So now this is not. Okay, right. First of all, let's say, can we learn anything from all this? This is not a perfect and complete history. I'm painting a picture for those who perhaps didn't know. There's a lot of stuff I've skipped over. The shenanigans at the end is important, because there's always shenanigans. It's just the messy shenanigans of capitalism and the private sector bouncing things around. But all these happy people, the happy pictures. People are happy pictures of people on the ferry. This lovely double arrow here. And this on a fairly modern looking vessel, actually. This is obviously a close-up shot showing here. So there's what is there that we can learn? Well, Firstly, I think we have a good example. The ferry system here, and this feeds into the thesis that I referred to earlier. Sealink offers us a good example of how publicly run enterprise can be. A publicly run company can be innovative, it can be effective, it can be efficient, it can be popular, and indeed it can be profitable. And profits in this case means allowing a greater level of investment, improvement in services. Boat good. Yeah, boat can be good. The Channel Tunnel is great, and we should run it more. There's 50% free capacity in there. Run more trains. Get rid of the shuttle. That's my controversial subject, which might be a future episode. Is get rid of the bloody car shuttle. Get people in that train. Get them out of their car so that they can take public transport on the other side of it. Get rid of the shuttle and swap it with more passenger trains and reduce the overall price of the train so that more people can take the train through the Channel Tunnel. That's another future episode, methinks. Yes, reverse double arrows on the funnel. Yeah, indeed. So, yeah, this is. I think this we have here because it's a simpler business. It's easier to draw the lines of what's being spent where. It's quite easy to draw direct comparisons between the different operators and see how effective Sealink was versus its competitors. It's also an example of some really nice international cooperation, which is nice. It's very, the Sealink consortium was a very easy match of these various sort of national entities. I think we have, it's just, I've talked really much about what was going over the Irish Channel, the services over the Irish Channel. I have focused a bit on the English Channel, but the services across the Irish Channel were again very popular. It was a cheaper alternative to flying until recently, cheap domestic flights popped up, which we kind of have the EU to thank for. Boo, but among other things. But these were a success story. So boat good is what I think we've learned. Go on, I'm going to go big face and see what else are people saying. Let's whiz over here and go make my face large. Any thoughts or questions? Bob's Rail Relics is saying if you build a tunnel, it can screw slower surface transport. Both Folkestone and Bologna learned from that. Yeah. Boulogne. Sorry, not Bologna. Boulogne. Yeah. Thanks, Bob's Rail Relics. Yeah. Lots of people who use the ferry already, which is nice. Would electrification have gone differently if Sealink was still integrated with the railway? It's hard to imagine that they wouldn't try to at least connect the major ports with electric freight. That's a very good point. So I struggled to find a decent history of exactly what happened to the bits of the... It's almost like we'll do a follow-up episode to what happened to that containerization, or maybe do a containerization episode. I picked it out because I wanted to point out the kind of innovation within Sealink, but actually what happened then to that element of the business of kind of the organization. I couldn't find a clear picture of what happened. So it's talked about a bit in the thesis, but yeah, there's more to be talked about. It's still cheaper to get the ferry over to Ireland than fly, especially from this corner of Wales. Yeah, for sure. You don't have the rail fare to pay. But again, as Detour said, the rail sail ticket exists and is very competitive. Cheap flights also ended regional Eurostar and Nightstar. Not entirely, a bit, but not entirely. So. Howard Meow is saying the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway had the largest fleet of railway-owned steamships that sailed from Goole to continental ports. Yeah. Integrated into the LNER. The LNER ran lots of these services. The grouping brought lots of these railway services. But there are hundreds of this is integrated transport. It's most extreme. I think what's disappointing in losing Sealink is we lost that integration, and given ferries are the cheap alternative to the Channel Tunnel, actually an integration of rail and ferry across the channel, particularly over to the Netherlands, where you're further up from, or to either to Tyne IJmuiden or like even some of the other kind of connections that allow you from the north. So the Tyne ferry or the Hull ferry would be very nice if they were integrated into rail. Be very, very nice. The worst thing about the shuttle, Les Shuttle, as opposed to more trains, is it's cheaper to take a 9-hour coach ride to Paris that goes on the train than to cut out the middleman and take the train. Absolutely, it is absurd and horrible for passengers. You're absolutely right. Foot ferry is always cheaper, although Brompton folding bike is expensive the first time. Yeah, that's true. Carnival don't own P&O. Carnival own P&O Cruises. P&O divested lots of bits, so they kept the P&O brand under a holding company, but P&O Cruises is owned by Carnival, not P&O Ferries. P&O Ferries is owned by DP World again. Yes, others are pointing this out. Budget Eurostar for just cross channel. I mean, this is a situation where I think competition through the Channel Tunnel, if they're in lieu of government stepping in and doing a better job of allowing more services, I think competition could improve Eurostar service, because Eurostar service is shoddy. It's hopeless. It's overpriced and chiefly. But one of the main problems for Eurostar is not Eurostar. It's actually HS1 Limited, particularly in St Pancras. They're unwilling to spend the money needed to expand. They need to get rid of. Well, stay tuned actually for what they need to do. More on that in the future. Future discussions on that to be had. So, right, it's 2101. Stack up your questions and thoughts and comments. I'll pick them up in a second. But in the meantime, we're going to do the usual outro stuff, which is saying thank you to all the audio-only listeners. Thanks for joining. Please go back and listen to last week's episode if you didn't already. It was a good episode with some really good discussion for apprentices, particularly, but generally if you're interested in a railway career, there's some very good advice in there. Yes, hopefully I've done a reasonable job of audio describing what we're talking about here. It's a bit dashy aroundy because it was, funnily enough, quite a nebulous story to pull together, and I ended up telling... to kind of pick out the themes that I wanted to. It's fiddly. Hopefully you've all followed. Do let me know what you think. Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for the patron to support more of this sort of thing happening, to keep supporting this, justify the time that I spend preparing this and other things. As my patron supporters often say, it's not just Rail Now that they support me for the other things as well. So if you like the campaigny stuff that I do, or you want me to do more of another thing that isn't necessarily this, then patreon.com/Gareth Dennis is where to do that. You can come and shout at me to get back onto doing an engineer plays in Amphitrust. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and abuse. Gareth Dennis abuse. Loose change and abuse. PayPal.me/ I'm speaking to my teeth. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and abuse. GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. Some of it now painfully ironic. GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for where the chat continues ad infinitum. More questions coming in and thoughts and comments. Ina has some interesting points that we're going to pick up. Next week, I've not actually got a picture in the background yet, but it's another news episode. I might also change the name, but basically it's a news episode. We've got a lot of stuff to sweep up. There's lots of things that have been happening. We're going to scoop them all up into a pile and talk about them. There's some things that are chewier than other things, some things that be quick, some things that we might talk around. News episodes always very popular, so do come along and join. So let's get my big face back up again. Everyone, what's going on? So Ina, how big of a role could rail and ferry play in really competing with flights? Hard to ignore just how much slower they are, and flights are pretty cheap as is. Yeah, while we continue to massively subsidise the aviation industry, it's difficult, isn't it? Ferries feel like a very easy, natural thing to shove a bunch of batteries in and run as battery. So I'd be interested to see to what extent that's true. For short trips, certainly, charging big old chunky batteries becomes more complex. So I'm interested to know what that might look like. What fully electrified long distance, channel ferries might look like, because obviously they're very large. Very interested to know what that might look like. If you have some thoughts, for a point. What else is Ina is also saying only solution seems to make flights way more expensive, really. Well, that's kind of the solution for a lot of things. They need to cost as much as they actually cost, rather than all the costs that they don't have because government subsidises them to an enormous extent. Train worms, any possibility for services to not use St Pancras to make use of their stations? Not without a large amount of investment in the facilities at those stations, because the issue is the customs facilities are just not large enough. So I don't want to shoot my own fox, but the capacity to put passengers through St Pancras departures, the departures capacity at St Pancras, the hourly departures capacity has dropped by over 50% as a result of Brexit. So it's just an enormous reduction in the amount of throughput that you previously would have had. Let's see, what else has been? What other lots of interesting things. Howard Meow, I recently listened to the TRU episode where you didn't mention the actual TRU project. I believe the Apprentice episode is a pre-record, so I intend to watch it immediately after this. I didn't mention the actual TRU project. I did mention it. I just was talking about all the previous iterations of it before this current one. The actual current one, it is an episode, multiple episodes of its own, because there's a lot to say. So, what else? Okay, let's chat. Fully Charged has a vid on the Helsingborg-Helsinger ferry, which has supercapacitors. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's an option. Master Trams, there's a good episode to cheer me up after the Downard's loss. So thank you, even if it did have to end up with private companies wrecking something beautiful. Well, indeed. Hooray. Marvellous. Yeah, I suppose my conclusion was that P&O have just trashed what was a decent enough service. Look at my bleached out face. Marvellous. If that's going to help if I do that, yeah, that does help a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Still look pink as anything. Anyway, enough of me waffling. It's 5 minutes after the hour. Quite enough of that. Do keep suggesting your guests who you want to have on, by the way. There have been a few good suggestions recently. Do keep suggesting guests, because I'm very keen to bring back people who've been on before, but also bring some new guests in. What's my plan doing? Dracania Marginatus making a bid for freedom behind me and trying to look, kind of looks like it's trying to grab the golden Pandrel clip, doesn't it? I've had that thing since I bought that. My first ever IKEA trip on my own as a student. I bought that thing. That's why it looks so wizened and thin. It's already lost one of its 3 stalks. It's sacrificed to the greater good. Anyway, I digress. You don't need to know that. Simon's here, though. Hello, Simon. Lovely to see you here. I'm going to wave. Everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will see you all very soon indeed. Cheerio!